Okay, welcome everyone to the final section of our week of home buyer webinar. And we've had from start to finish of the sequence of someone who's trying to find and purchase a home. And we had the first process, which was the mortgage qualification process, which was, we had our guest speaker, Mr. Junior Simmons. And the second night, once we get them qualified, the next process is to find them a home. And that's where the realtors come in. And we had Mr. Mario Golden of Alice Realty. He was on Wednesday night. And then once we find them a home, we need to make sure that that home is okay, is everything is all right. Even if it's a new home, we found out from our home inspector, Mr. Desmond Langton, that even new homes can have problems. So we have to do the home inspection to make sure that after you close and own the home, you don't get any surprises, leaking whatever, or busted pipes, or rotten pipes, or bad electrical problems. So we learned a lot from Desmond. And then last night, we had the process that is necessary. The home has to be insured, especially if you have a mortgage. But even for your own good, if you bought it, purchased it cash, you still need to protect your assets. And tonight is where we put everything together. We have with us I forgot your name, I'm just kidding. Miss Dee Harrison. I've known Dee for what, 10 years now? Going on 10 years? I forgot. And she has gotten younger and younger every day.
Oh, Lord.
And it's in the genes. But Dee has been in the business for over 30 years now. And she's an expert. She could teach this with her eyes closed. And the title company plays one of the major roles in real estate. No matter what you're purchasing, to transfer or convey title, it has to come through a process. And I won't steal her show. I'm going to let her go over. We do have a presentation set up, but before we do that, we just want to turn it over to Beverly and Dee and see if they have any more input.
I'll formally introduce her.
Okay.
So, as Noah said, we have Dee Harrison. She's the owner president of Alpha Reliable Title, where their motto is "We stay open until you close." She's been in the business, she's a title agent for 30 years in the title industry, and she has owned different title companies that operate in the state of Florida. And now this Alpha Reliable, right?
Mhm.
Yes, so she's here to educate us, let us know what the process is. For those of you who were asking questions in the first part about liens, this would be the time to get those questions in for our expert. So welcome, Dee.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
You're welcome.
So you want to tell us a little about yourself that we left out?
That you don't already know.
Yes, just for our audience.
Beverly covers it pretty much. I have just about 30 years of industry knowledge, and I've worked with various title companies prior to owning my own for a total time frame of approximately 25 years. I've been working for myself. I've had my first title company in South Florida for 10 years, and then I relocated to Orlando and has been in business in Orlando and still serving the entire state of Florida. So our main office is in Orlando. We do have a satellite office in Miami, but we cover the entire state of Florida regardless.
Awesome. So you have a presentation which I'll be handling from sharing a screen here with your PowerPoint presentation. Do you want to jump right into that or anything else?
Yes.
And then if we have any questions afterwards, you have time for that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I always like to, in welcoming everyone to a home buyer workshop, if there are any folks that are viewing live or people listening, I want to congratulate them for taking the time to get in on this session, because if they're thinking of buying a home, this is the most important step in their life one of the most important decisions that they will make. So it's very important to know how you can protect your investment and how important it is for a reputable title company to be involved in that process, because for the most part, the general public or a first time home buyer just knows that they need to close at a title company, but really they have no insight knowledge as to what happens in the title process. So tonight I'm going to educate the buyers, the first time home buyers especially, on the roles and functions of a title company and the importance of having a good title company that can make sure your asset is protected. So we can go right into the first slide.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to do the screen sharing thing, and let me know if you see it. Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So,
Okay. So this is our company. You can move to the next slide, Noel.
um,
Okay. I'm so tempted to scroll down myself. I forgot your
okay.
you're the controller. So scroll down.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, it's very important to know the roles and functions of a title company in your home buying process. So there are certain things that a title company does on a daily basis in handling the contracts that comes in from the realtors for a new home purchase. Um, there's so many things and so many elements that leads up to the day of signing and receiving those keys and the seller receiving their proceeds check. So once the title company gets involved, our duty is to make sure that that title that's going to be transferred to a buyer is clear of all liens and anything that could adversely affect your home title. So in doing so, there's the title search process where we ensure that all the necessary searches have been examined and all the debts and anything that could be a hindrance to that title and that buyer's financial future. We make sure that those are addressed in the search and examination process. We also go back to the first slide for a minute.
Oh, you go back.
You're the expert.
Arrow up, arrow up.
Okay, previous. There you go.
Okay, we also are the ones, the company that collects and disperses all the funds. So we collect all the funds from the buyers, including the security deposit, which is the deposits that's going to bind your contract. We also work to protect the lender's funds in the event that anything goes wrong and the closing doesn't happen. So that's the reason all the monies are held in the escrow account at a title company. Our ultimate purpose in the home buying process, however, is to issue that title insurance to both the lender and the owner. We issue two types of title insurance, the owner's policy and the loan policy. So at the end of the day, we are an insurance company. So we're referred to as a title company, but ultimately we are an insurance company. We do the same thing that an insurance company does to protect your roof or your health. So when you're going to get a health insurance policy, your doctor is going to make sure you check out physically and everything is in place before you can get a good medical insurance policy. The same thing goes for your home title insurance. We make sure the title checks out clean. We make sure there's nothing against the title that's going to affect your home buying process. Next slide. We always ask ourselves, why title insurance, since the title search has been done and shows clear, because obviously we are going to address any matters that we find in the title search process. However, after we've examined those matters, we would ask ourselves, then why do I have to purchase title insurance? Uh, Going back to the example of a roof inspection and a roof insurance, the roof is inspected and it's most times not leaking, not showing any signs of defects. However, you still have to get a homeowner's insurance policy that protects the roof. And that's the same thing with title insurance. So we cover against unforeseen losses, matters that are unforeseen in the chain of title. There's such things like the interest of heirs or spouses not being addressed when a deed was transferred 2 or 3 sellers ago. We look at any probate documents to make sure that if there was someone that had passed away in the chain of title, a previous owner, we look at how their interest was probated, whether their heirs were taken into account to make sure that the title transferred properly without any cloud on those title. So yes, we make sure the matters that are easily detectable and easily foreseen, those are addressed. However, there's so many other matters that could come up in the future that could come as a claim against the title. And that's the reason for title insurance, so that buyer doesn't lose. They do have an insurance to fall back on should any of those matters come up. Next slide. So the first thing, or uh, the first communication that's going to be made with the buyer and the title company in the home buying process is, once that contract is accepted by the seller and all the signatures are in, all the signatures are there, the buyer now has 3 days in which their realtor will literally tell them to get in touch with the title company to make that binding deposit. It's sometimes referred to as escrow deposit, a binder deposit, or just your deposit for your contract. This tells the seller that you are a serious buyer. So we accept the deposit in 3 different forms. The buyers can wire transfer funds to us, and we send them wire instructions by encrypted mail. So their money is less likely to be intercepted. We also accept deposit in the form of cashier's checks or money order. And we also accept personal checks because there's enough time for that personal check to clear, because that is the first deposit. So they're still going to be able to clear that check. So that's the first contact with a buyer and a title company, is to submit your escrow. Once the escrow is received, we make sure the escrow is posted to the correct file, and that the realtors are notified with an escrow confirmation letter, and also the buyer's lender. So now the ball will start rolling, because the buyer has shown good faith that they're serious and they have bound the contract with their escrow deposit. Okay, so the next step is where we actually begin the real work of what we do. And on all our title searches, we search all the way 30 years back, or to the date of plat, whichever is less. We make sure that all the conveyances from the date of that plat, all the deeds that were transferred, were properly executed, properly signed, the legal descriptions are correct, and the correct property has been conveyed over and over. We look for the liens, the mortgages, the judgments, and any other matter that is recorded in the public records. Anything that comes up during that process, we take and examine each item. If there's something to be paid off, like a mortgage, that's going to be paid off at the closing. If there's a judgment, sometimes they're unknown to the owner of the property because of certain matter that takes place in their lives, and they probably didn't know someone filed a judgment against their title. Once we examine those items, we figure out how we're going to clear them and make sure if they're not monies that are due, then we need to get satisfaction of those items and record them in the public records so that this problem doesn't continue to come up against this title for the new buyer. The title search shows us recorded matters. However, the title search does not show us unrecorded matter. So there's a big difference. So if someone has a large utility bill, for example, and there's letters that keeps going to the property. However, if the city did not record a lien, we still cannot know if that bill is owed. So therefore, we have another search that's called the municipal lien search. This is where we search for code enforcements, code violations, open and expired permits, and outstanding utility bills. So once the municipal lien search comes in, if there are any violations or code enforcement matters or utility balances, we address those once again with the owner of the property, because very often they're also not aware or they forget that there was a code enforcement issue that they hadn't taken care of, and now it's still sitting against the property. So sometimes it's not because the seller is oblivious to these things. They just don't realize how gravely it can affect their title, and that these things just doesn't go away. They can sit against your title for long periods of time. If the property lies within a homeowners association, we also have another search. It's called a homeowners association estoppel letter or a condo estoppel letter. This is where if the owner is selling a condo or a home that is a part of an active HOA, we also request an estoppel letter, which gives us outstanding balances and violations by the homeowners association or the condo association. The violations can range between weeds in the yard, driveway needing to be pressure washed, painting of the exterior, debris on the property, garbage bin in sight. All those little things can be sitting against a person's title, unknown many times to the seller. So once we get that letter, we start addressing that as well. We contact the HOA and we find out what is it that seller needs to do. Is it just a fine, or do they need to get involved and cure the violation, then request another inspection and have a clear estoppel letter sent out in order for us to prepare for closing. So those are the three types of searches that are involved in the title search process: the regular title search, the municipal lien search, and the condo association or estoppel lien search. This covers what I just went over, the HOA estoppel, where we search for the outstanding balances, the violations, and we address each one. And they can be, these things can be really annoying, but they're important. So we even have buyers who say to us, it's okay, I'll paint the driveway. It's okay, I'll do it after closing. It's not that simple, because you're accepting a potential lien against your title. Whereas if we were to close and accept the buyer's word that they're fine with it, that same buyer, when it escalates with the homeowners association and a fine is then assessed to the violation, that buyer can come back to us and say, well, why did you let us close? we didn't realize how this could affect us. So that's the reason we make sure that all the matters are clear before we proceed to a closing.
Okay.
Um, the survey. So this is a sketch of what a property survey looks like, and it's sometimes referred to as a blueprint. And it shows you the drawing of the house. It shows also, which is not something that the average person will understand, but some of these numbers, what it does show is if the neighbor's fence is encroaching on your property, if a shed is encroaching, if the driveway is encroaching, or if they're even encroaching on the utility easement as well. So these are the things that we also look for in examination, because we've had instances where we've had people having to move the fences. We've had sellers who had to go to their neighbors and ask their neighbors nicely to move over their fence onto their property because it's encroaching 2 or 3 feet onto the subject property. So, in looking at the survey, we make sure that when we insure title at a later date, when this buyer settles into their home, they don't also hear that they need to move their fence off of the neighbor's property. So that's the importance of the survey, and to use a reputable survey company as well. Once we've done all the searches, all the examinations, we prepare what's called a title commitment, and we send that on to the lender. So, collaborating with the lender, we're going to let the lender know in a title commitment, which is a commitment, is committing to the lender that we're now almost ready to issue title insurance. So we do not prepare and provide the lender with a commitment until we know that this title is insurable. We can send a preliminary commitment while we're clearing title defects, and then we send a final commitment. So we start collaborating with the lender by letting them know that we have everything that we're needing from the owner. The owner has sufficient funds coming from the proceeds of the sale in order to clear all the debts against the property. The agents are also informed at that time that we have a clear to close on title end. Obviously, not the mortgage end. The mortgage lender will let them know when there's a lender title close, clear to close.
Oh, listen to you. You ain't got no job. Stop.
So the loan package with the buyer, the loan package that the buyer is going to be signing is going to also come to us as the title company for the buyer to sign all those closing documents once we go over the entire closing package with them at the closing table. The seller's documents are prepared according to the matters that are found on the title commitment. We prepare all the necessary conveyance documents, all the necessary affidavits that's needed, and to make sure that everything that's supposed to be transferred with that title is accurately accounted for in the document preparation process. Once the funds are collected from the buyers, when they're agreed on their numbers with their lenders and they're balanced for closing, the funds comes to us as the escrow agent. We balance the file, and we're the ones that pays everyone, including the realtors, the lenders, inspector, insurance company, and the sale proceeds. Once all of that gets done, the deed is sent to the public records along with the mortgage, and those are the documents that goes to show that title was accurately transferred to the new buyer and the buyer has placed a mortgage on that property. So the mortgage gets recorded as a lien on the title. Once the documents are recorded, they come back to the title company, and that's when we're able to issue the title insurance policies to the lender and to the homeowner. So this slide that we're looking at is kind of a snapshot of how it all comes together in the end, leading up to the keys and the sale proceeds and completing your home buying process.
This is the last slide.
I think I have a page with closing costs.
Okay.
A
Yes.
CD. Okay, so this is the new closing disclosure. Well, it's no longer new. It's like about 5 years old. But this closing disclosure kind of gives the buyers an idea of how their closing costs are going to be broken down. So section A shows the lender's origination and underwriting fees, and that shows the monies that's going back to the lender to process your loan. Section B shows items that are necessary in order for the lender to get all the information that they need to process a file. So such as credit report, appraisal, and to check the flood area as well. Section C usually lists the title services because those are our services that the buyer also did not really shop for, but a quote is provided. So the lender makes sure that all the fees that comes into them can balance with their loan estimate when they give what used to be called a good faith estimate. Section D is actually a total of all the above. And other costs includes the recording fees and the government charges. So if you notice, this is quite a bit of money in this section here, and all of that goes to the public records, goes to the county where the property is located. That includes documentary stamps on the deed paid by the seller, documentary stamps on the mortgage paid by the buyer, intangible tax paid by the buyer, and the recording fees for any documents to be recorded. The prepaid items are what the lender is going to collect. They're typically going to collect 1 year of prepaid insurance, which pays for the first year, and then their lender is going to be escrowing every month that the mortgage payment is made. There's going to be a little portion included in that payment that takes care of the property taxes and renew the insurance as well on the anniversary of the closing. Other costs includes any other miscellaneous items that the CFPB does not have a specific area above for these costs. They can range from seller paying a bill for to cut the lawn, or a realtor's transaction fee, or a closing coordinator fee, or anything else that needs to be paid in this closing is going to be reflected in section H, listed as other. So this is a good example of what your closing disclosure is going to look like. So for you first-time home buyers, you will always see these charges and they look like a lot. But if you take and match it up with your loan estimate, they should really come very close. This is just a detailed description of what your combined closing costs will look like at the end of the day. So I think that's the last slide.
Yes.
But I also want to go back and cover some additional items that can be found in a title search process, which oftentimes surprises many sellers and their agents as well. And that one of those things is child support. So many times we come up with delinquent child support liens and judgments against a person's title. Unfortunately, most homeowners, sellers who are selling really doesn't realize that this is a valid lien. And many times they have been caught up with the child support agency. However, no one took the time to go back to the child support agency to ask them to release the lien. So the lien is still sitting there against that title. So those are some of the things that are not obvious to a person owning a home that they would not know. So certain things can slow down the process, but it doesn't mean that the seller didn't have a good title, because no one does a title search on your property unless you have a need to. So you really don't know what's sitting out there in the public records.
That's true. All right, so we have a few questions from the online Zoom participants.
Okay.
I'm going to take them in the order. This one is from Desmond. He says, why does the search go back over 30 years? What if the property is 50 years old?
Yes. So if the search goes back 50 years old, we go back to the date of plat.
Right.
So if that land has been platted for 50 years, we are going back to the date of plat.
Okay.
So it is gonna go all the way back to the very first deed by the developer.
Mhm. Okay. Another one is,
Okay.
what has been your most difficult or challenging title search, and how did you handle it?
Okay, so my most difficult and challenging title search. Wow. There's a few. However, we had one where, and this was pretty recent as well, where 3 owners ago, there was an equity line on that property. The bank that gave the line of credit, obviously, that's 3 owners ago, so they're out of business. The bank that bought over their assets is out of business. The property sold and closed with 3 title companies over the last 22 years. And none of those title companies addressed this. So then we looked like the bad guys, because there's 3 title insurance policies that have been issued over a 22-year period, and no title company said anything. So the owners, of course, were upset with us. The buyers were wanting to close. The realtors are wondering what's going on. But at the end of the day, the person who took out the line of credit, he was also deceased. So we also could not get to verify his personal information to communicate with the lender. And because of privacy laws, that lender has no duty nor obligation to speak to us as a third party releasing pertinent information on a client's loan, even if it's affecting the current seller. Because the way they're looking at it is somebody should have addressed this a long time ago. So in cases like that, unfortunately, the only remedy, if all else fails, is what's called quieting title. That is a process that has to be done by an attorney, and that is a very expensive process. So we had to send the client to get the title quieted, and that's how we were able to resolve that. But in the quiet title process, they were able to see that the mortgage was still valid on the property. So it was just a matter of one title company assuming that because a title insurance was issued 10 years ago, it's okay to go ahead and issue another one and another one. And then it ends up with us who say, hey, something's going on here. So an interesting situation on the part of a buyer, and this is, I'm mentioning this scenario because this is a first time home buyer presentation. So we had a situation where the gentleman, first said he was single. Okay, that's the buyer. During the process, um, there was a female's name added with an addendum to the contract, but the lender was only giving the loan in the gentleman's name at first. Then they brought her in and added her, I guess, to strengthen the loan. In the process, because they were not husband and wife, before she was added on to the loan, I think, the question was asked, are you guys married? No. Okay. Uh, long story short, they said they were engaged to be married, so they joined on title. After closing, about 3 months later, we received a phone call from the lender that the the borrower, the man's wife, remember he said he was single. Well, wifey shows up and say,
Not the
my
one,
husband
not
bought
the
a
one in
house.
the, not the one in
Huh?
the transaction.
No, no,
Oh.
no. He said he was single, but
Right.
a lady showed up and said, my husband bought a house and
Mhm.
closed, and this was primary residence. So
Mhm.
I'm mentioning this because buyers need to know how important the statements that they make, how much weight it carries in their home buying process, because we rely on the truths of the clients. No one could say to this person, you don't look single. I don't know what a single person looks like or a married person looks like, but we don't have any way, and we don't have a duty to check. So the wife shows up, and the wife says her husband bought a home and he bought it as a primary residence. Now, most of us knows Florida is a homestead state. So if one spouse owns a primary residence, automatically the spouse, the other spouse has a right to move into that home and just say, honey, I'm home. And so that was that situation where the wife says, this has been my
Honey,
husband.
I'm home.
Yeah, but he had a girlfriend and he bought a house with his girlfriend, but he's a married man. So wherever he calls home in the state of Florida, homestead laws and rights now tie in. And that situation did not, I don't think it ended well. So she asked me, what can she do? She needs to put her name on the deed. I said, I can't do that. You need to go sue your husband for perjuring himself and telling us that he's single. So you need to go figure it out on your own. But it's very important that buyers know and that realtors know to ask these questions when you go to show a home. If you
Yes.
go to show a home and you're meeting with a gentleman, it's very important to know that person's marital status.
Mhm.
And if the person says they're married, you need to know where their wife is.
Right.
Is she going to be available? Is he purchasing a primary residence? If he's purchasing an investment property, it's not necessary based on the lender's guidelines. But if he's purchasing a primary residence, he needs to know that his wife is going to be needed, even though she's not necessarily going to be on the loan.
Mhm. All right. So another question is closing day. What should the buyer bring and also the seller to closing? And also a follow-up question is, does the buyer and the seller have to be there at the same time to close?
Okay, so the first question, what do you need on closing day? Definitely your ID. And if you can bring two forms of IDs, just in case the lender's closing instruction requests that us as a title agent collects two forms of IDs. It's always good to have two forms of IDs. Now, IDs needs to be valid. So an expired ID is not considered a valid form of ID. So those have to be valid identifications. Um, the buyer will have already wired their final funds, so they're no longer coming to closing with a cashier's check since this whole um,
Scamming
fraud
business.
with cashier's check has started. So for the buyer, only if the lender asks you to bring something else to closing and delivers it to the title company, like any form of final documentation. Other than that, the buyer really need to bring their ID. Same thing for the seller, unless they were bringing in some original documentation, which we had the copies of, like a death certificate. If we can work or file with a copy of a death certificate, but we do need the original at closing because it needs to go to the recorder's office. So if any documentation was requested from either party, that's gonna be delivered at closing, and the seller must have IDs as well. As to whether sellers and buyers have to be at the closing at the same time, the short answer is no. They do not need to be there at the same time. However, it's a preference. If they're all questions already answered, there's no question that the buyer may have about the property and where something is located on the property, then it's not necessary. A lot of realtors prefer to separate their clients. I know many realtors who will never allow the buyer and the seller to be at the closing at the same time. The reason for that is sometimes there can be tough questions that should be presented or addressed by a realtor in the right way. And a seller may create panic and anxiety for a buyer. So it's just all about the comfort level on that day of closing.
Another question is, I'm not even sure if this is, but when you have the walkthrough, when the buyer does the walkthrough, and which is required, right?
Uh-huh.
It's highly recommended that you do a walkthrough before you come to closing.
Yes.
Okay, so when you do the walkthrough and everything is in place and you're happy, what happens if somehow between when you do the walkthrough, come to closing, get the keys and go back to the house, things are missing?
Okay. So without giving legal advice, I'm not an attorney. However, once the title agent gives the keys and to the buyer and the proceeds to the seller, our job is done. If they go back to that property and anything is different, it's gonna wind up either in dispute or there's gonna be some dispute resolution or mediation. But really, the closing ends when you leave the title company.
So the property is yours.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Okay. All right. Bev, any more questions?
You're perfect. You answered everything I was thinking of addressing. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure if our listeners have anything else that they want to ask.
I don't have any questions on
You did-
Facebook.
You did a very good job explaining the whole process.
Well,
And
great.
wanting to make
Thank
sure-
you. I hope some
Okay.
buyers on here listening was able to benefit from this information,
Yes.
and that they will have a better idea of how this all comes together for their first time home.
Yeah. And just to let you, this is a recorded session, and also on Facebook, it will be there forever. We will also have it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Noel and Beverly Real Estate on YouTube. So the information is out there forever. So we can use it as a tool also when we're doing presentations. As realtors, we can use that. Your slide was very powerful. And it was very well done, put together and professionally done. So
Well,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's a Friday evening.
Yes. We
And,
appreciate you doing this.
and that's the only good thing that came out of COVID. I'm in Fort Lauderdale doing this.
Okay,
Oh,
awesome,
awesome.
awesome. Let's see, Paula holding her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and she used language that everybody can understand because I don't like when people speak in the language that they work in and everybody else is lost.
Right.
So you did an excellent presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you very
Paula.
much. Thank you.
Yes. Well, it was a pleasure being on here with you guys, and see you on the next one, Noel.
Okay,
And then,
yes, this is the first of many, but I think next time we're gonna do like one just by itself, you know, but focusing on either the buyer, the investor, or the seller, so we can
Right.
look more detail in this space of time. But anyway,
Okay.
like I said, it was a pleasure having you, and also a pleasure knowing you. You know, we think we're honored to be with such expertise at our phone call. Dee answers her phone.
You guys are amazing.
She answers her phone no matter what time of day I call.
Exactly.
That's
Well,
awesome.
Bev, remind him our slogan: "We stay open until you
Until
close."
you
Right?
Close. Yes, that's right.
Cute.
And you stand by your word. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's cute.
And I also have to say praises and accolades to Daniel, Marcy, and I forgot the other lady in your office.
Alex.
Entire
Yeah.
office staff,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
professional.
Yep. Yep.
And I
Thank
know
you.
what the best time to go to your office is lunchtime. Yes.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes.
You're
You know.
always eating.
Yes.
Yes, so it's a good work environment, and I applaud you. Thank you so much, Dee. Have a blessed
Thank you.
evening.
All right. You two guys. Have
Bye.
a
Thank
good
you.
Good
one.
night. Good night, everyone.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Good